welcome, and please take it away.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is very morning here in land of enchantment, New Mexico. I almost missed the talk. I thought it was like a 7 o'clock mountain time. And there's a lot of these mountain times, central time, Pacific times in this country. So I'm glad that Dr. Wagle called me a few minutes ago. Excuse me. One minor point is that if you hear my dog barking in the background, that means he is trying to get me to take him out for his walk, morning walk. So forgive me if you hear some commotions. So it gives me great pleasure to
miss you.
Excuse me? I heard something. I'm sorry. Are you hearing me?
Yes, Dr. Bohara.
Okay. And you can also see my slides, right?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. So anyway, so today's talk, I've structured, I know that I have 30, 40 minutes, whatever, I'll try my best. I have so much to talk, and I think it becomes more important for us to use what they call the economy of words, and I'll try my best. What I will do today is briefly discuss what the Nepal Studies Center is doing, how it started, and what its purpose is. And then I go into some of the highlights of our projects. And in this case, I'll pick the urban area. And this is a very, very collaborative and collective effort. So I may even have some of the people involved in our research program listening to it on the network. So the word science, technology, and society, that's what I put up there. So it is motivated by some of the long-term experience that I have encountered in social science research, which is what we do is we do a lot of writing, research, publication, but lately the effort to create what they call the community engaged research, meaning the research that might even help the community get some feedback. So taking the research from your classroom and your computer to the field has been one of our objectives lately, the Nepal Studies Center. So with that, let me give you a brief intro to what Nepal Studies Center. So Nepal Studies Center was started back in 2005. So that came about as we thought, some of us faculty here in North America, that we'd been noticing lots of intellectual flight from Nepal to North America and later on to Australia. And so one of the things we thought was that this brain flight, the people come here, go to good schools, become researcher, faculty, and generally they don't tend to go back to Nepal. So the question was, how could we harness such an intellectual pool in North America was the underwriting kind of a concern for many of us. So what we decided to do was to set up this Nepal Studies Center at the university. And then this is, again, collective effort of many of our scholar friends in North America. And that was like 15 years ago. And back then, we were only a handful of economists in North America. Now there are several dozens, not only economists, but also applied researchers, engineers, doctors, you name it. The intellectual pool in North America is really growing very rapidly. So, and so that's one of the motives we had. And so first thing we did was we started building our National Nepal Studies Center's research capacity. So first we wanted to set up some platform portals, and then we started recruiting actually all the, several PhD students over time. Actually, the first PhD students who came to University of New Mexico, and let's say Curtis Nepal Studies, who are Dr. Mani Nepal, and I know that you are listening right now. So he was the first one who went back to Nepal and now involved in EC mode. And but now we've been getting these scholars, Nepalis, Indian, Chinese, Bangladesh, Pakistani, and working all kinds of topics in the Himalayan region, including, of course, with a focus in Nepal. And over the last about 6-7 years, we've done about 11 research projects, like a field engagement in Nepal. And you can see a variety of research or topic there, anywhere from Bagmati River Restoration Project, Kathmandu Waste Management, climate adaptations, in health, cancer research, water quality. That's our latest kind of a work that we're moving towards within the urban context, and health and preference of Danda River, that's in Siddharthnagar. And then the project funded by actually seed money came from ICMOD, air pollution and the waste management. And then a couple of other projects we did in Western Nepal was the HPV vaccination awareness, as well as the mental health and use of technology. And that HPV vaccination awareness project was funded by American Cancer Society. So you can see the field research abstract on our website. And this center, one way or the other, affiliated with the center, there's been about like 24 doctoral students who have graduated for this center. So it has done a quite good job in terms of producing doctoral research. And then the next phase we faced was, okay, so we do a lot of research, everything. So how do we connect back to, say, Nepali institutions? So we did this couple of visits with KU's vice chancellor came here, our vice president went to Nepal, we signed some MOUs with ICMOD also. And so that's the connection we wanted to do, to link these two continents so that the intellectual fertilization will move forward. So that's objective. And then after a while, we realized that this only connecting with the Kathmandu, and of course we did several projects out of that in health and climate adaptation and so on. But we also started to realize that this Kathmandu-centric intellectual asset had to be decentralized. I think everything was in Kathmandu. And so with the federal system emerging, so we decided to think about how to create an alternate model so that we could, kind of share the fruit of intellectual, whatever the production that could be happening with Nepal Center, or even with other academic platform here in the US that could be diverted away from Kathmandu toward the other places. So we picked the place because of my hometown, and things was a little easier to get going there, was Siddharthnagar and Rupandey and Western Nepal. And that motivation came from looking at the climatic impact in the Himalayas, right? The melting of the glacial and the snowpack. And so that prompted us to start thinking about some sort of project idea along the Gandaki corridor from Mustang down to the India-Nepal border. So we wrote a very small National Science Foundation project proposal. Then we submitted, and it was a travel grant, 6 of us, and the climate scientists and the hydrologists and 3 engineering students and myself, we all went to Nepal. And then we traveled all the way from Mustang down to Lumbini. And then we had a big workshop there to start thinking about creating a Lumbini Center for Sustainability idea. So that center was established in collaboration with the local NGOs and college. So that's there. So idea was to see if we could use this Lumbini Center to provide a research platform for not only us, but also anyone interested in doing research in that part of the world, especially Western Nepal, let's say. And then some of the research project, I'll go very quickly. And so some research project that we started with the collaboration of that center, that station or that house in Siddharthnagar, is water quality, river restoration. Then we also did waste management. And then lately we also conducted gender hygiene, air pollution air pollution awareness, adolescent mental health. And then we also created some workshops, including one with the IIDS Economic Outlook. And then on top of that, remember, one of the objectives was to see how we could take research to the field. So we also started looking into the creative and innovative way to advance that idea. And so we did this health leadership training for mothers group with two health professionals from New Mexico. Right now they're doing COVID training. And then this community engaged outreach and research became one of the ideas that we wanted to develop to see the impact of research for the community. And as a result, some of the outcome that came about was creation of the biomuseum, eco clubs, floating filtration system wetlands, done by a couple of researchers from UNM, and then water quality monitoring, air quality monitoring, and groundwater monitoring, some of these things. So when you say monitoring, that's where the science comes. So one of the objectives of our research team was to see how we could use scientific tools and knowledge with the social science. And some of the research highlight I'll be talking about will use that approach. And so some of the new initiative we are trying to do is the pollution tracking sensor we installed in province 5 to collect real live data. And that was partly funded by the provincial government. And then we also creating citizen science group. Again, that citizen science group, the idea is also to see the impact of research on the field. And then we are also developing one pollution tracking portal. I'll share that with you in a minute. And then the other thing we are also trying to do is the air pollution monitoring app. So the idea is for the people in Western Nepal or anybody to download that app and see what the pollution level is in their community. So one of the ways to, again, so that's the idea of how you can use your classroom and research all the innovation and take it to the community to make a difference there. So that app is being developed, a prototype is already ready, but we're not ready to take it, prime time yet. So I'll show you a little bit about that later. And then the other initiative within the urban context is the, due to the rapid urbanization of the area, like you have a Butawal in north, Siddharthnagar and Lumbini. So I think in about 20 years, all of that will be connected. It will be almost like a metro area. Huge expansion is happening, especially triggered by that international airport and the promotion of this World Heritage Site. So suddenly you have to start thinking about issues like water crisis, or what about the urban forest. So we need to start thinking about preserving them as we move toward the rapid urbanization. Of course, comes out the issue of air pollution and your water quality, water pollution, as well as soil pollution, all having all kinds of health impacts. So that's the focus of some of the research results at the end I'll share with you. And that Rohini Urban Forest and Wildlife Refuge was created about 9 months ago. Actually, some of them even came to US to check out some of the similar urban conservation in New Mexico. So that's because of the COVID, that project is on hold. So, so this is the list of something I explained earlier. So here's what is this research about? So this the collection research came about out of this concept called the problem-based learning. So problem-based learning is the idea is to bring the problem from the field, in this case Nepal, analyze in the lab, and then come up with some of the solution, take it back to Nepal and implement it. So that's the sort of a full circle model we developed. And what you're going to see is that's the process. So keep that in mind. Remember, we bring the data, and of course, bringing the data will require a lot of like a lot of doctoral research. And then we do all the analysis within a course called 369. That's called problem-based learning using data analytics in urban Nepal. That's the topic of the course, got approved by the Senate here. So that course takes the data from Nepal, analyzes, finds out the problem, and offers some solution, and goes back and implements in Nepal. So that's the full circle. So this is how I think social science has to do. That a lot of other science, like engineering, do that all the time on the field, but the social scientists, we don't. We just write papers, we analyze it, we present it, that's it. So this is the model through what I call Sustainable Development Action Lab. Well, it's almost like a MIT's poverty lab, but not quite that high, okay? Just the example, okay? So select highlight projects, as I said, my title is Science, Technology, Society, and the Environment. It's kind of how to connect all of these so that we could learn about and come up with some solution regarding the urban environment, health, and human health, and some of the solution I'll be presenting. So I have to go a little fast here. I know, I gotta show you a few things. So here's the urban. So in 1987, you have a Shanghai and what it became in 2013. So urbanization has a lot of rapid expansion. So with that comes all the other problems, as I said, right? Pollution, water issues, health, and so on, or transportation issues. And FYI, sort of 8 or 9 dirtiest cities in the world is in northern India, 8 out of 10. And why is it significant? Because there's a spillover effect, especially the transboundary air pollution from India to Nepal. So I'll show you some evidence of that in a minute. So this, with a focus on the urban concept, so what is this urban health and environment resiliency model might look like? So here's kind of a little conceptual framework I want you to keep in mind. So here's ultimately the outcome is your health, right? And then, so that's the outcome. And the pollutants in the environment, it could be air pollution, it could be water pollution, it can even be noise pollution, right? For hypertension, and as well as it could be soil pollution. So we have taken a few in our research. We haven't done all, that's our goal down the road, but we have taken a couple of the air pollutants, and doing the biology of it will require some science. So we try to bring science into it. Then the other factor within this resiliency model is to look at the environment, right? What kind of environment you live in, like a river could be one of them. Or it could be the density of your roads, open space. And you can also look at the built-in environment in a similar fashion. And it could even be the type of toilet construction you have. So those are the kind of, one is the biological environment, the other one is the built-in environment, could also play a role in terms of health outcome within the urban context. And of course, you cannot ignore the human behavior and what they do with the knowledge they may or may not have, right? So that the behavior and mitigation also affects this. And then the other thing is occupational hazard. So we'll also look into the occupational hazard, like what kind of work you do or what kind of exposure you experience also affects. And at the bottom of it, awareness becomes an important concept within this overall resiliency model, okay? And what Research Nepal Study Center is doing, several students, doctoral students, and even honors thesis and so on, they're picking up a piece of it. So it could be, for example, this pollutant in the middle. A lot of research you see out there will not have that, will not have the science component. You'll see the regression of health, which is the self-rated health. They say 1 to 5, how do you feel? And then what kind of a toilet you have, or what kind of education you have. So we see lots of research like that in public health or even in applied economics. So what we want to bring in is the primary exposure, actually. You know, like the education doesn't affect your health directly, but education affects your your behavior your behavior, and that behavior might produce some sort of biological pathogen in between. So that becomes the primary exposure. So in this case, we are taking, for example, E. coli. So having E. coli in your water is the cause of your health, not the being aware or having a degree, right? So that's kind of unraveling of these linkages is the purpose of this research program. So we bring in science, we bring IT, and also, you know, a few things we have to learn on our own, and so on. So what are the measurements? So in terms of health outcome, we have undertaken several. So for example, your self-reported, that's the very common one. And then the other one is the number of ill household members, or diarrhea, typhoid, children, adult. I mean, that's one way to ask that. So our survey asks those questions in several of them. And the second one is the lung capacity, right? So instead of simply asking them self-reported wellness, it would be better to ask them like to measure their actual lung capacity. So using what we call the spirometer. So we bought this spirometer, was donated by Yale Global Health Institute after a project we did with them on arsenic. So they left, sorry. Excuse me. So that spirometer was donated by that lab. And then the other outcome that we also looked into, the COPD incidence in Siddharthanagar, and by visiting all the hospitals and collecting the COPD incidence. So that's another outcome. So you can look at the health outcome could be measured in 3-4 different ways: subjective as well as objective. Objective being measuring their lung capacity. So by getting that spirometer and getting all the pipe, and then taking the strength there and working with our local collaborators and measuring the actual, their lung capacity is what we wanted to do, rather than self-reported health. And the pollutants also, we looked at the E. coli, so presence of E. coli in their kitchen water. And then there was the project we did in Devda, looking at the arsenic and its presence in their water and the well. And of course, this air pollution was another pollutant. Well, we don't have the full spectrum of data yet, but we installed about 9 purple air across Western Nepal in province 5. And they give you every 2 minutes, which we can even look at it from our app. I'll show you a link in a minute. So we can look at it live, these things. And then the other pollutants you can track is using the NASA satellite image, or aerosol concentration. And the satellite goes through Nepal once every day, and then we also grab that data to see what's happening in Nepal. So that's our data collection approach. So that has a lot of science in it, right? So social science, scientists need to start opening up our mind and look into some of the biology and technology aspect of it. Environment is the river and open space. Looking at the open space, so we also start using the Google map to take the stock of the open space by ward in Bhairava. So that goes into one of the projects. And then built-in environment is the flush toilet, by asking people whether or not you have a flush toilet. And then also using Google technology to calculate the road density, building density, and also as a part of the built environment is the water sources, like a public taps, the boring. That comes out of the survey. And then the behavior and mitigation strategy, we started looking at several things, like their mask wearing behavior, hand washing behavior, utensil washing, clean stoves, whether or not they have put an air filter in their house, and then their behavior of dumping waste everywhere into the river, and then recycling and composting behavior. So these are the behavior, which are some of the positive, some of them are negative. So we also started looking into those behavioral aspects of this urban resiliency model. The reason is then we can come up with some policy prescription, right, for the metro. And then the other thing, we also were interested to look at the occupational hazards, that the labor, farmer, how many, what kind of exposure they're experiencing, outdoor exposure. That also has a health outcome. So we collected that too. And then of course, the awareness of the community in Western Nepal, especially in Rupandey, was to look at their awareness activities and programs like recycling, composting, and what kind of the public authorities are spreading the good public health news about through TV, radio, newspaper, about the water quality, air quality, that kind of thing. And of course, their own scientific knowledge. So you can see this all 7 components I outlined within that urban resiliency model. We have to collect data in each of them, and that cannot be done in one shot, in one survey. It requires several components, several surveys, and a lot of people involved in it. some of the highlight of the projects within this context of urban resiliency model is the freshwater conservation, drinking water quality, that's one project, and health impact of E. coli contamination in drinking water, and then the role of water source. That's something I'd like to talk about so that metropolitan authority can learn something from it. What kind of their water system is affecting child health. So that result I'll show you. And another is just for fun. A lot of time modeling is done by, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of your regression method, right? We always come up with here's the outcome. We want to know what are the factors that affect this, the regression. So that Bayesian network analysis doesn't impose any causal link. It lets the data create a structure, and I'll show you. And that uses the taboo method of algorithm in Bayesian network. And so I'll show you a nice highlight of that. And then the next one is air pollution exposure avoidance and differential exposure health in socioeconomic subgroups. So like the spirometer, using that to understand their lung capacity and what they are doing or not doing that has created that health outcome. And then the other one is the COPD. So we went hospital to hospital, collected data, and then we wanted to see how that COPD incident by district is affected by the environment they live in. So I don't know if you, many of you are aware of it, obviously. It's called the environmental justice. So this has been a big thing in the US, that the places where the poor folks live are the ones that attract a lot of dumping sites in terms of pollutant. So, and the land is cheaper, and that's where they are, and they get the pollution, they get sick. So that kind of a environmental impact is known as the environmental justice issue. So we also touch upon that a little bit. And finally, the solid waste management research looks at how the behavior of their management of the solid waste coming out of the household, whether that is in terms of recycling, composting, or even preferring how they want their management, their household waste management be, let's say, handled in terms of their willingness to pay for certain attributes. So that's another research that we did. This is just some of the examples within this urban context. And ICIMO provided some funds, especially for the waste management and air pollution. Civil society provided some funds for water quality. Nepal Center and the Ministry of Social Development provided some support to install pollution sensors. We are getting data. And the Lumbini Center for Sustainability and the college, they provided the logistical support. So it's a very, very collective effort. So here's the quick acknowledgement of the research folks. Bright, energetic, Samrat Kumar, Neeraj Khatiwada. Right now, Neeraj is doing his fellow at ICIMO. Rahman, Thanesar Paneru, grad students, Brandon Deflon, Daniel Rose, Vishal Khanal. And then our IT team, Nikhil Ganvir, Rahul Chakravarti is actually a student in India, Hannah and Thomas Hampson. Lumbini Center of Sustainability team is Ms. Swati Thapa, Anup Paudel, statistician, Prakasham Raima Jabal. So this is a very collective effort. So I want to start with very quickly. I know I'm slowly running out of time, but let me share some of the results. Now, the real thing. So water quality and health was the first project we did. Here I want to kind of start showing there's a lot of projects. I'll just pick one where the role of E. coli and how it affects your health. And in this case, we pick both self-reported, actualized, actual health. And I don't want to go through the science behind doing the E. coli because we let our microbiologist folks at the college handle that because we collected the data, gave it to them, and they did this ultraviolet analysis to get the data to see whether or not the kitchen water in the kitchen of household in Siddharthnagar had E. coli. So we had about 320 data on that. It takes about 24 hours to get the result. So this is one of the research projects that has used 300 plus actual biological data on E. coli to do this such social science research. Very few. And so this is kind of a little picture how it is detected. So red means negative, and then that's orange, or the yellow means positive. So empirical strategy, we economists would like to always start with a model, and our dependent variable here is your health outcome, right? However you measure in terms of actual diarrhea incident or the self-reported. And the focus of our study in this case was the E. coli. Remember that we believe that your behavior or the built environment affects your E. coli, and that E. coli affects your health. So that bringing E. coli as a mediation, right, mediating factor was the focus of our research, which is rarely done in the public health literature like this. So what that means is, here's the stage 1 and stage 2. So basically, first you have to look at the how the E. coli gets into your water, and then how that E. coli gets into your health. So that's the 2-stage system that we created. And sometimes that's called endogeneity problem. Many of you are familiar with it. So here's the model, and there's EI is on the right-hand side. That's your E. coli. But the E. coli doesn't happen just like that, because E. coli depends on what kind of a behavior, meaning whether or not you wash your hands or not wash your hands. That also, what kind of toilet you have will also affect E. coli, and in return, E. coli affects your health outcome. So we wanted to bring that mediation. So here's a little bit of descriptive statistics. The only one thing I'll highlight is 35% of the household in Siddharthnagar had E. coli problem. Keep that in mind. So that's pretty high, right? So here, very basic statistic is the self-reported. You can say the presence of E. coli created a less well-being, even self-reported. And then of course your diarrhea incident is very high when you have E. coli. That's a very basic non-model thing. Here's the model. We call the probit regression, whether or not you have a E. coli presence. So see, this is the first stage, right? We want to explain the presence of E. coli and then use that as a predictor in your second stage. Sometimes this is known as the control function approach. And so in this case, you can see the E. coli is driven by what kind of a water source you have. So deep well has a less E. coli, it's negative. So you can see that. So deep well, if you have a water source deep well, you have a less likely to have E. coli, meaning tap water or the municipality supported water is bad, basically. Likewise, a flush toilet, if you have one, it will have a less E. coli. So those things could have to be understood very properly. And then your behavior, right? If you wash hands, if you wash your utensil, it will have an impact on E. coli not having as much. So that is a very good sort of a results evidence for municipality to talk about some of the awareness program about the hand washing and the type of water they are supplying. Okay, so, and also the toilet, some mandatory thing actually in urban areas, Siddharthnagar requires flush toilet, I believe, I'm not sure. Next is, so that first we determine the E. coli, determinant of E. coli, and then see how that E. coli affects. So you can see all that negative means it's the reverse. Your self-reported variable is reverse in order, 1, 2, 3 is the lower means better. So you can say lower means worse, sorry. And then E. coli means it reduces your well-being. So that's negative. And then for the, that's the self. And then the number of sort of a child diarrhea incident, an adult, and combining both, you have a very strong evidence that E. coli does matter in terms of affecting health. So that's just a very strong result right here. And that's just the summarizing all the hypotheses within one table. So you can see that E. coli affects the child, adult, both, whether all samples. So there were 3 samples we took. One was Siddharthnagar, and then 2 Rohini and Bagaha, and the results are very consistent. And that's the conclusion. You already sort of, it's very obvious that learning about E. coli and hand washing is important science, okay? And so very quickly, so drinking water source and child health. And so another thing we wanted to know, come up with some policy recommendation for the policymaker that what they're supplying through public tap or the tap water is not as safe as they might think. So it is not being cleaned. So, so let me just skip some of the literature review. And so so what we did was we started looking at the type source of water and that how it affects the diarrhea for the children. So you have about 12 to 12% children during that month suffering from diarrhea. And then the water source, you can see about 35 is the private tap and the public tap in Siddharth Nagar is about 16. So say 50% of the water supply comes from people's tube well or boring. The rest comes from the city. So city is doing a good job in a way, like 50%. But the question is it safe? That's the research we wanted to answer. And if you look at the graph, the children diarrhea, if you have a piped water, you have a higher level of diarrhea. You can clearly see this bar graph. So it looks like the municipality has to be a little bit careful what kind of water they're supplying. It's not safe. And then here's the model. So the negative binomial model is, it handles for the number of sick children, whereas the logit model, whether or not someone is sick, is the binary versus the count model. And here's the result very quickly. So you can see the pipe water increases your likelihood of your diarrhea incidence in the household. And that is true for both negative binomial model, which is the count of children being sick, as well as whether or not someone is sick. So pipe water is certainly not a very good idea. Whereas if the household treats water, right, boiling or use some UroGuard chemical, or even does some filtering, it has a positive impact on your health. So that's doing the water treatment is obviously important, but be careful this water, pipe water. I'm going to skip a lot of this. And one of the things I wanted to share with you with some excitement here. So this is the latest research we did. A lot of times, as you saw, results are done using the dependent variable, and we can say throw lots of independent variable on the right-hand side. That's called a priori restriction you put. Health is a function of whatever the behavior and the biology and the environment. We always start out with that. But here what we did was this DAG approach. It's a Bayesian network analysis where we don't impose any structure and we let the data reveal any causal link. So you can see very interestingly, your sickness becomes the recipient of all the effect. So we're very pleased to see this thing. That outcome is affected by hand washing, water treatment, look at the arrow, and this E. coli is the mediation. That links between the flush toilet and the washing, and that further takes you out to your sickness. And if you look at this strength calculation we did, percentage strength, so E. coli, washing hand, and the flush toilet in a combination seems to explain almost like a 30, about 80% of the structure, 80% of the causal link that's happening in this diagram explained by these three factors. So pay attention to E. coli and your behavior, because that matters in terms of producing sickness. So we're very pleased to see this model verifying the earlier results I presented. Okay. So now I'm coming back to this final idea is the air pollution exposure. What are the determinants of respiratory illness, mass, occupational hazards, and so on. So let me, I'm going to skip all this motivation thing. So this, something I want you to pay attention to the left-hand side. This is the, just a week ago, we grabbed some of the NASA aerosol satellite data that passes through Asia or Nepal, and we plotted that. And you can see, in a smaller caption there, you can see the area around Shanghai and Beijing industrial area has a very high pollution, red, and northern India is all throughout from east to west is pretty polluted. So what is it? The Kanpur, Lucknow, you name it, Faizabad, all of that, right? And it has a spillover effect into Nepal. So you can see that Nepal and India, they have to deal this transboundary air pollution. So my point is why we study air pollution? Because of that right there. So not only is it important to look at your local sort of a pollution situation and how it affects health, we also pay attention to the transboundary. Some sort of a collaborative effort has to be done, because what we do affects them, what they do affects us. And the direction of sort of a wind direction coming from mostly north to south to north causes Nepal more vulnerable, right? Make Nepal more vulnerable. In fact, there was a study done by a Nepali working in Germany that showed that the aerosol particulate matter coming out of Delhi or northern India travels with the cloud and the airstream, hits the high mountain and drops into the snow, and then it melts and comes through our river system. It's been detected. So what happens in India affects Nepal. So this is just our small effort to do that. So why do we do this? Well, it means that we need to collect data, make people aware, and get the policymaker involved. So this is the part that we're working on in terms of creating an environmental dashboard and the live kind of a air monitoring app we are developing because of the motivation behind that. And the right is the morbidity of asthma data. It's a little old data we plotted across Nepal. So let me just skip. So 4 things we were interested in pollution. One was the what kind of occupational hazard might there be? And the two types come to our mind. One is the farmers and the laborers, because they are the ones who are dealing with farmers and dealing with burning haze and all kinds of chemical they are engaged in, can also affect their lungs. And laborers are always working in the sun, in the construction, they are also exposed. So we were interested in looking at the occupational hazard and how that affects. And of course, the environment. So it's the brick factories in Kathmandu I used to see all the time. I don't know what the situation is. I don't know if the valley has banned it, but there are some still, or several in Rupandehi. So that could be one environmental factor, as well as the road and the dust, everything might also contribute to that environment. And then the third is, of course, the mitigation strategy. Are they wearing masks? Or are they taking some precautionary measure, like even improved stove at home or air filter, that sort of thing. So those 3, keep in mind, occupational hazard, environment, mitigation. So we wanted to create a model out of that. And so health outcome is the your lung capacity. So that's the spirometer. So we randomly collected, this is a dissertation of Khatiwara. But we collected 300 plus 305 household, and we asked the people to blow into this little spirometer that was donated by Yale University. We had to buy some of the replacing pipe. And so this is what it looks like. So they blow into it and we measure the lung capacity. If it is low, it means bad, because that means their breath holding capacity is low relative to the longer times. So that ratio tells you how strong your lung is. I don't know complete biology behind it, but that's what it is. So one thing we wanted to do very quickly to see the capacity of lung capacity of the 2 types of occupation people, right? Laborers and farmers. That this is the kernel smooth density PDF and or histogram. You can see other occupation have a higher, right, ratio, and the lower ratio is bad. Remember that. Low ratio bad, and those are the laborers and farmers. So it looks like the laborers and farmers are experiencing acute respiratory illness, and obvious reason being they're exposed to outdoor pollutant more than the office holders and the students and the housewives maybe. And the other thing is brick. So we have about Ward 1 and 4, and 20% of the people are living around those bricks, right? And then you have this proximity to the road, a calculation we did. And then exposure was, avoidance exposure used was face mask, air filter, clean cooking stove, and so on. So let me just, and here's the model. Basically what we did was we wanted to see how your lung capacity is affected by what kind of protection you use, what kind of occupation you are in, and what kind of a built environment you have around. So those three factors are of our interest. However, there's this thing called endogeneity. All it means is that there's a reverse causality, not only protection to lung, but maybe the people who are using masks are also doing so based on some of the other factors they are either aware of or not aware of. So that's called endogeneity, right? So the people who use protective gears perhaps has what kind of perception they have about the air quality, their awareness, occupation, and then maybe even income, age, all the factors go into deciding their protective behavior, and that protective behavior in turn decides your lung capacity. So this is the two equation simultaneous model. You'll see that sigma there just to show that it's been estimated simultaneously. And then the other added thing we did here was to allow the potential spatial spillover effect. Quick results. So you have the ratio as a function of all those things. You can clearly see simple model, simultaneous model, as well as the taking into account the spillover effect model, right? And also within the spillover model, we also endogenize the perception, the protective composite measures, right? So you can clearly see if you wear your protective measures, mask, and so on, you have a better respiratory health. So that's the positive and significant, the first thing you can see. The next is the laborer farmers have a negative, meaning that they are suffering more. Their lung capacity is worse than the office workers. And then you can, the other thing to think about is the brick. So the area that has bricks will have a worse lung capacity. So that's kind of interesting. And the rest is not very significant, like the distance to road and so on. So this shows that your putting on a mask matters, what time of job you do matters, and where you live matters. Environment matters, the occupational hazard is there, as well as how you behave in terms of mitigating those effects matters. So that's the model you have. Okay.
Dr. Bohara, we should probably leave 10 or 15 minutes at least for Q&A. So
okay, all right. So let me just wrap it up then. So that's basically you saw the. Let me just skip. Let me go to solutions. So I put together a story for you, right? The water quality, pollutant, how that affects health, and how the awareness and the built environment and the science behind it might play a role. So I just kind of try to highlight all of that. So what are the solutions now? Let's go to solution part of it. So what we did with the Lumini Center of Sustainability, we created eco clubs in 3 schools, upstream, downstream, medium, just to show them the importance of water quality, measuring it. So we got school students involved in it. So we are developing a citizen science curriculum so that we could use more school in this eco club so that to spread the importance of tracking water quality and then making them aware of how important it is for your health. And we also created for public community a biomuseum there. I can talk about that if somebody has interest. Biomuseum at that college. And then we also had the environment art project for floating filtration system. 2 UNM students, artists went there and worked with the community to as an awareness. And then another one was the Netherlands University grant doing the climate change awareness workshops, as well as health leadership training we did. So think of all of these activities as a way to taking our research results and then taking the community in terms of awareness and training. So that's what we did, taking the research results and making them practically impactful, hopefully. And finally, the new project is we are installing Purple Air across Province 5, about 9 locations. And then we are developing an environmental monitoring dashboard, I'll show you in a minute, and then the air pollution monitoring app. So here's this, if you look at the right side, there's that app we are developing. So this is the early version of it. So if you download this app, you'll see whichever location you want, you can click on it. You'll see the PM2, 2.5, temperature, pressure, and humidity right away. So what it does is if the people or the community have access to their pollution status, they can put pressure on the policymakers. So that's the idea, right? How to empower them with data and technology. So that's the app we are developing. It's almost done. It'll take another few months probably to make it nicer, prettier, and more effective. And then the next one is how to use the NASA satellite data with the ground level to get a better mapping, more micro level mapping. So that's the project. But this environmental monitoring board, give me a second. I'll really see if I can show you this. Sorry about that. Do you see my screen? The dashboard screen?
Only the presentation.
Okay, so you see now?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the dashboard we have created for Nepal or Province 5, where we can track the different pollution. Like for example, this is in Dagdai, right? This is east of Siddharthnagar. So if you click on it, idea is to see this kind of a data. So it gives you the current one, and then the past 30 days, people can go and check it. And if they want to see some of the historical data, they can go and see it. So that's and then this is under development, and we are doing this for each sensor. Hopefully, like this is one, the Lumbini area, similar strategy. And then those color, green, red, is given by the gradation given by EPA, right? EPA has this thing like 0 to 50 is healthy. So we are trying to use the color coding approach to show the public what their air pollution is like. So that's the project, right? So we have several of those. I don't need to go through everything. And we also do historical analysis, statistical model, a little bit. So here's what we try to do is to look at the winter versus summer idea. So it is the winter versus summer idea. And in the winter, you have a very high pollution throughout the day. You can see morning being a little better, and then the afternoon, and then the night. And then in the fall, you have a higher pollution because the fall cold air traps the particulate matter, whereas the summer, it flows up because of the hot air. So that can be seen. And we also did the high frequency analysis, quality, air quality analysis. And I don't have everything here, but that's just the example you'll see. And this also will have any air pollution related research work. So the report submitted to ISIMO is uploaded. And then this spot is for the mobile app. All right. So this is where we will be putting all our information, how to download a mobile app and how to check it and so on. So I think I'm basically done, and I've said what I wanted to say, how Nepal City Center takes the research from journal down to the people's level. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bohara. So now we're moving into the Q&A part of the talk. And again, I want to mention that everyone should use the raise hand feature, and I'll call on you, or you can chat me your questions. And please, again, keep yourself on mute when you are not speaking. So while people are getting ready to ask their questions, Let me read out one of the questions that came in chat. Apurva Lal asks, with reference to the IV estimates in the E. coli study, how plausible is the exclusion restriction? It seems like these measures of household behavior, for example, the well, may have a direct effect on health outcomes independent of E. coli. So what can you say about the plausibility of the exclusion restriction?
That's always an issue. And I don't know, that's just what we also did the, we also did the likelihood ratio test on those extra instruments. And I think the value, if it is more than about 3.9, around 4, can say that this is a decent instrument, but that's always an issue, whether you allow a direct effect or indirect effect. And our whole premise of that research was to make the E. coli as the central theme rather than a mediation, because again, but he is right that the source of water can have a direct effect. So it may have not only the E. coli channel, but non-E. coli channel as well. So I agree with that.
Okay.
We don't have, like a very good answer on that.
Okay, another question that came in the chat was by Siddharth Mokhtan, who asks, do you have plans to evaluate the effectiveness of these tools that you're developing? Why did you choose these tools that you did, and how will you know that they are effective?
I think, let's see. It is all about the funding, right? So one of the things we, for example, we did the, with the, let's assume the waste management project we did. I didn't have time to explain that, but basically people dumping waste everywhere had some sort of health impact and so on. So one of the things we wanted to do, and we were thinking about, and we're just trying to find a collaborator and some funding, is to look at the community, divide into two randomized control, randomized sample. One given, let's say, recycling bin, right? And perhaps recycling bin and say, some sort of waste management sort of container, something like that. You give them that. And then we planning to track that for about, like, let's say 3 months. And then within that, there's a concept called learning by doing. What it does is the idea is to bring them into a lab. We have a lab, our collaborator has created a learning lab at a college. So bring them, and we use that for our awareness campaign. Bring them into the lab and then give them the information about their recycling or whatever the outcomes. Look, your outcome has been this. And then send him out. And then let's see, wait another 3 months to see if that added information plus the bin had some added advantage on that, right? So it is a little bit of a complicated sort of a experiment we plan to do. We're looking for some funding, or if somebody is interested in the group, our network and our local logistical, everything is very, very ready. We'll be ready to do something like that. Yes, so we haven't done it, but that's our thing.
Okay, and now we have a question from Amina, who has raised her hand. Amina, you may unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Bohara. Very interesting presentation. And I'm Amina Maharjan from IIDS. And since I'm also involved in air pollution studies, more from social science perspectives, I found that very interesting, and I would definitely like to be in touch with you. One thing yes. I didn't get it completely is, you have that urban resilience thing, but then you presented a number of study findings. So I was thinking, are you going to plug those in your model? Where you have mentioned about behavior, built environment, the biological environment, and ultimately impacting human health. That was one of the questions that I had. And secondly, I am actually at IIDS leading a study in this region and looking at the air pollution impact on highly vulnerable occupational group. what was interesting, it goes beyond the individual health, and it's really necessary that we start to look into it. Maybe something for you to consider in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very important question. I'm glad that you raised it. One of the things we learned from that occupational hazard is that those people, like the labor and the farmers, who face this pollutant, air pollutant through various types directly, don't seem to wear masks. So one of the recommendations we made, like I went through very quickly, was for the municipality to make it mandatory for businesses to provide masks to the laborers. So that's the mandatory thing. So if you want to hire a labor in your workforce or in your construction, you got to provide that mandatory, that mask mandatory. I think that's the outcome I can see. So yes, that hazard, and of course the making the labor and the targeting labor and the farmers aware of what kind of thing they're dealing with, particulate matter, creating some awareness workshop for them might be the next step on the ground level. Yes, thank you for that question.
Okay, are there any other questions? Anybody would like to ask a question? There was a question that came in the chat from Badri Prasad Bastakoti, which I didn't understand the question. So if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, clarify it, you may do so. No, it doesn't seem like it. Okay, well, we are about 5 minutes away from time anyway. And so at this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Swarnim Wagle, who's the chair of IIDS, to make some closing remarks on this presentation. Thank you, Dr. Bohara, for a stimulating talk.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much. Let me start with a couple of thank yous. First to Professor Avidit Acharya, who initiated this series and has been kind enough to agree to host and moderate the first 3 discussions. Let me also thank Binisha and Dr. Biswas Gochan and my other colleagues at IIDS who have taken this up. And I think we have a fantastic lineup of speakers. We've decided to do this the first Monday of every new month in the Gregorian calendar. So the next one will be on January 4th. And I think we have given our distinguished fellows, senior fellows, all the senior staff, everyone in the wider research community in the diaspora. Once we pull them all into this lineup, we have material probably for the next 2 years, I hope. So this is a great thing to bring together our collective sort of intellectual capital to answer some of Nepal's pressing public policy problems. And this is one bright side of COVID, right? So because, I remember being a young student in London when, just to make a one long distance call from England to Nepal, just for a minute was such a task, so expensive. The voices were inaudible and things like that, right? Now, with Zoom and the whole digitalization sort of revolution, we're all connected. So this is a clear evidence today. So we have a Professor Bohara in Mexico, Avidit at Stanford. I'm here in New York right now. Colleagues from Britain and Australia, and of course our Nepali audience. So there's a fantastic possibilities that are being opened up. Now we were extremely honored and privileged to have Professor Alok Bohara kick off this series. He is, somebody I respect deeply. We were honored to have him as our Distinguished Adjunct Fellow at IIDS. Very, one of Nepal's most celebrated and distinguished scholars, and just amazing that what he was able to present today. I think 2 things sort of stood out for me. The first is, how do you do evidence-based policy making, right? This was really key, and this is how do you combine data and then analyze it, and then come up with solutions, and then take it to the implementation level. I think this is, how do you propose testable research hypotheses? How do you apply rigorous empirical strategies? And how do you communicate? How do you communicate those results and findings in an intelligent or intelligible manner so that these things can be taken up by policymakers? Now, I work at the National Planning Commission. I can admit now that we never had a presentation of this nature at the NPC during the 3 years of my term there, right? So this is not something that is common in Nepal. There are lots of handicaps in the sense that the bureaucrats and the senior policymakers often go with their hunches and bias and biases rather than being dictated by data. And so the culture of evidence-based policymaking is itself very new in developing countries. This is something that's been well established in the West, and this is what we're trying to mimic. Right? So what we heard today is really a very rigorous university departmental seminar that you might get at Harvard or New Mexico or Stanford or University College London. And we're trying to bring that with, again, aided by these technological possibilities to a much larger, broader audience so sort of the global Nepali forum, right? So this is what we're trying to do. The topic was, of course, very technical, but I appreciate the way Professor Bohara was really making these connections, to the local jurisdiction and seeing and arguing how these need to be applied at the local level. There's a lot of policy action. The analytical rigor and the data and the processing happens at an academic level, but that has to percolate down to the implementation. So when you talked about the Vada Adhyakshas and the mayors in Rupandei Zilla, I mean, that's the linkage that we're trying to force here, and that's the purpose of good policy making, right? So I really want to appreciate it. Some of the topics, environment, public health. With COVID, obviously, there's a lot of heightened interest in the issues around public health. Let's say a year ago, this might not have been, as arresting or as popularly attractive as it might have been. But today, people are really broadened their outlook on the kind of questions that fascinates them, right? And I can say this again, from my experience in Nepal, the discussion and the public discourse is often about, Rajtantra, Ganatantra, Sapta, Samavesita, Bharat ra Cheen ko chalkhel, and too much of our national energy is consumed by these very big issues, right? And rarely do we get into the technical details, the empirical strategies, the methodologies. So I think this is something that the universities should be doing, and unfortunately, Kathmandu University, Tribhuvan University, for a variety of reasons over decades, have been weakened. I mean, maybe in the Panchayat days, we have some of these public policy think tanks. So this is one vacuum. Of course, the universities do not have the luxury of shying away. Oh, netaharule buzhदैनन्, यहाँ फोरम नै छैन, रिसर्च गरेर मात्र भएन, सुन्दै सुन्दैनन्, लिँदै लिँदैनन्, के काम भने? That's not the luxury academic institutions have. Irrespective of the external environment, I think it is the duty and dharma of our university departments to undertake the kind of research that Professor Alok Bohara sort of exhibited today. And it is also the role of think tanks like IIDS to come in and fill the vacuum and take this agenda forward in a much more applied way, right? So we don't do too much theoretical work. And this was, again, sort of the kind of work that Professor Alok Bohara does is something that institutions like IIDS should be doing going forward. Let me also mention that I think, at first there will be resistance, right? Policymakers say, "Tha bhakai kura ho ni, garnu hami kaha nahune matrai ho, gardainau matrai bhanne cha." But त्यसमा पनि I think यो data र analysis लिएर आएर, ultimately politicians, in a democracy, they have the ultimate prerogative, right? They can say, तपाईले गर्नुभएको चिज एकदम राम्रो छ, ठीक छ, तर यो कारणले हामीले अप्लाई गर्न सक्दैन, यी कमजोरीहरू छ, हैन? अथवा it's politically suicidal for me to act on this topic. That's their call, right? And people will judge them on that. And the role of the media is to sort of highlight these linkages and all that. And in Nepal, there are two bright spots, right? So on environmental issues, the Federation of Nepali Environmental Journalists, the kind of once they were organized, they were probably funded by some external development agencies in the early days. NGOs जस्तो पनि थियो FNS भन्ने. But after that was organized and formed, environmental issues started to be covered in the Nepali press in a very rigorous manner. So issues about Chorolpa and climate change and these bluffs and glacial outbursts or air pollution ke kuraharu pani. So it's very important. So media le चाहिँ त्यो एकदम arcane academic discourse लाई जनताको तहमा ल्याउनको लागि जुन भूमिका खेल्छ त्यो environment पनि we have fantastic more than 2 decades of experience. अर्को economics मा पनि सेजोन भन्ने संस्था छ सोसाइटी अफ इकोनोमिक जर्नलिस्ट अफ नेपाल मलाई साथीहरूले भन्थे 15 वर्ष अगाडि they were writing about very mundane stuff as a up and down economics भन्छौ नि price went up price went down. अहिले you get some very rigorous analysis around budgets, around some pressing economic public policy issues, right? So I think media लाई पनि सशक्त बनाउन सक्यौं भने organize गरेर train गरेर, so some of these issues can really be so we move away from hunches and priors to really explaining in an intelligent way the methodologies, the data, and what the public policy implications of these issues are. So fantastic exhibit of what we're trying to do. And thank you, Avidit. Thank you, Professor Alok Bohara. And going forward, so on January 4th, we have Soledad Prilaman, who is a professor at Stanford. I think she's worked a lot with the data related to the earthquake reconstruction. I think that's the topic that she will cover. And again, what the public policy implications will be. One of her co-authors were Rohini Pandey at Yale, who is the director of the Economic Growth Center there, very distinguished economist. So we look forward to that work. And after that, we have Maheshwar Shrestha coming up in February. A student of Abhijit and Esther Duflo, did fantastic work on migration, remittance issues, currently at the World Bank. And we look forward to his presentation as well. But the focus is really on evidence-based policy making. How do you do public policy well? And I think we got this fantastic demonstration of that from Professor Alok Bohara today. In Nepal, let me end with this thought. Oftentimes, I used to go on these public forums or in the television interviews or speak in a public event. And I always made it a point to use numbers and weave in facts, make some analytical points, public policy implications. But all the reaction I used to get was, "Kya bolnu wo tapaile aaj?" So the focus was much more on fluency and whether you are dhara prabha or not and all that. Right? But still, so a lot of that natural, and those topics that are amenable to that kind of lecturing, that kind of public sort of monologue, are again these amurta topics, the big sounding topics, right? So we want to depart from that. Let's get into the granularity, the details, the empirical, and this is what really elated me today. What Professor Bohara was able to do. Topics that were not sexy, but he's made it really attractive intellectually. And very sort of resonates well with the public policy. So let me end with this. And I also love the interdisciplinarity of what he was trying to say, from the hard sciences to the social sciences, the institutional partnerships, from New Mexico to the mayor's office in Siddharthanagar, to Yale University lending the technology, NASA and Google Maps, EC Mode lending some support. So this interdisciplinary approach, right? Not just in terms of the fields and the techniques, but also how do we form these broad coalitions and alliances to do public policy well? And that was also something that stood out for me. So with that, thank you, and back to you, Avidit, to close the session.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wagle, and thank you, Dr. Bohara again. And I guess that's it. We'll see you next time, January 4th.
Alok.